the victims of Trump's war while he boasts about these criminal, immoral and murderous actions that he's engaged in. I mean, it is truly shameful. And I find it kind of hard to understand how there's sort of praise circulating for the Taoiseach's performance in this. I mean, just try and imagine this. Let's say a Taoiseach of this country went over and handed Vladimir Putin a bowl of shamrock and sat beside him silently while Putin boasted about his invasion of Ukraine, and then provided facilities for Putin's military at Shannon Airport. There'd be absolute outrage. And yet, that's what Micheál Martin did for Trump yesterday. Sat quietly while he boasts about war crimes, hands him a bowl of shamrock, giving legitimacy to Trump, giving him a political kudos and benefit of Ireland's National Day, while Trump is tearing up international law and committing war crimes. And even on the most selfish basis, he could, self-serving basis from an Irish point of view, he couldn't even condemn Trump's war for the economic impact it's having on working class people in this country and across the world. Never mind the death and destruction it's raining down on the people of the Middle East. He couldn't even condemn the fact that Trump's war has led directly to a jump in home heating, oil prices, gas prices, electricity prices for ordinary working people. On the international, how many times have we heard the government say how committed they are to international law? And they are beside somebody who is literally tearing up the international statute book on war crimes and crimes against humanity, and he doesn't say a word of criticism of it. It's a shameful, pathetic and embarrassing performance by the Taoiseach, and we will be challenging the government very strongly on that failure, and we'll be very importantly standing on a protest being held by the Irish Neutrality League that's happening at 6:30 this evening outside the gates of the Dáil. It was organised in advance of Trump's war against Iran, but now takes on an extra importance because, of course, this government wants to dismantle our neutrality and some of the checks and balances on us getting involved in these kind of criminal and illegal wars by countries like the United States. And as we speak, US troops are going through Shannon Airport when the United States is involved in a criminal and illegal war. That's a flagrant breach of our neutrality. Also, I just want to mention the Bessborough protest, as Ruth did. I'll also be attending, and I've been asked to speak on that. And as somebody who was born in a mother and baby home, and okay, in my case, the outcome has been good in that I was reunited with my mother and so on. But I'm very conscious of the incredible sensitivity for those whose lives were wrecked by, the church and state policies in this country that forcibly separated mothers from children, and the sensitivity around, the likelihood that there are babies buried in the area surrounding Bessborough. And, I think it's 150 acres of that 210 acre site has already been built on. So all that the survivors are asking is that there would be preservation of the immediate environs of Bessborough, so that proper excavations are done and there's a sort of respect for the memory of the victims of that cruel regime that persisted for decades in this country, forcibly separating mothers and children, often ending with the deaths of infants and their burial in unmarked graves. So really, I think something needs to be done. The government should speak up on this, but we'll be very glad to be on that protest this evening, standing with those for whom this really is an insult. It's an insult to the trauma that they suffered.
Just to focus quickly on one of the comments that Micheál Martin made when he was in the US. He said that, the headline is Shannon Airport not used by US planes for Iran strikes. What he actually said is that we haven't had any strong evidence that our airspace is being used for any attacks in Iran, which is quite revealing in and of itself. Because effectively it underlines the approach of the government, which is hear no evil, see no evil. The strong likelihood is that Shannon Airport has been, is being used for airstrikes, for preparation for airstrikes and the attacks on Iran in what is a barbaric, devastating, illegal, imperialist war of the US and Israel. And it is only the deliberate policy of the government not to inspect the warplanes that are going through Shannon Airport at an increasing rate that means that they have, quote, no strong evidence to prove that this is happening. There's very good work being done by Shannon Watch, who are part of, presumably, who Micheál Martin was giving out about those who were suggesting there's some sort of involvement of Shannon Airport. I presume he's also giving out about us. So on the 15th of March, just to take one day, we had a US Navy KC-130J Super Hercules landing from an airbase in Norway. We had a US Air Force Hercules C-130H that was there in Shannon overnight. There was an Atlas Air Boeing 767 troop carrier that spent that night at Shannon Airport, and there was an Omni Air Boeing 767 troop carrier coming in at 2:33. That's in one day alone. 4 US planes that are used for war. What's happening? Why is the US transporting troops at the moment? Well, they're transporting troops to the Middle East to be used in this illegal war on Iran. That's just one day, right? None of those planes were searched because the Irish government refuses to search them. There's also the fact, as the dish revealed, that an Irish air traffic controller guided a US Air Force bomber, this is a few days ago, on its way to attack Iran through Irish-controlled airspace. On top of that is, and I got a new PQ answer recently, we're heading up to 2 years now where we've supposedly had an examination by the Irish government into the flying illegally through Irish airspace of munitions to Israel. Exposed by the ditch. In reaction to that, the government said, we're going to have an examination into it. I've been asking PQs every few months, how are you getting on with that examination? Have you any date by which the examination will end? And every answer is always the same. It's ongoing. We can't give any more details than that. When I gave the details in person to Simon Harris in the Dáil. I walked across the chamber, gave it to them. That's the details collected by the ditch, which is the evidence to show that this is happening. So clearly just the government doesn't want to do anything about it, because the reality is they are complicit in the war in Iran, and they were complicit in the genocide in Palestine. The other point I want to briefly make, I understand it will be in the news today, horrendous situation facing families in Finglas. These are kids who are meant to be going to the Finglas Parochial National School, where when there was protests happening in 2025, organised by Equality in Education campaign, the day before those protests, there was a series of new special classes announced. Included in that were special classes to be opened in Finglas Parochial National School, to supposedly be opened for September 2025, to be used for 2025-2026. Parents have learned in the last week or so that these classes, they're not open now, they won't be open until 2027. And therefore, at the moment, as opposed to going to special classes, the children have been accommodated in a local community hall, getting 2 hours of education per day, as opposed to getting these special classes. It's horrendous what these families are being put through, and unfortunately it is a tip of the iceberg that is coming for the coming September, where it looked like many hundreds, possibly up to 1,000 children will not have appropriate school places, despite all the protesting, all the campaigning, all the organising, and all the promises from the government on the other side.
Could I ask quickly on Bessborough, what level of intervention you'd like to see from the state there, and whether you'd like to see the full excavation of those lands? Obviously there's a number of campaigners that would like to see this maybe go ahead along with the memorial, while another group would like to just see it fully memorialised and excavated. Just where do you think the state should come in on this?
I'll just say something and then, yeah. So just also, I want to correct, I said there was 900 apartments, it's 140 apartments. It's 900 children that are estimated to have died in Bessborough, just to correct that. I think what the state should do is it should sit down with all of the survivor groups and discuss it. It shouldn't come, a solution can't come from outside. They have to listen to the people who are impacted and work out what they do, whether it is what you said there, that it would become a site that people would visit, to mark the travesty of women being incarcerated in these homes effectively because of the culture of the time, which was, arising from the church itself. the cruelty, the suffering that happened there. That should be done with survivors and the families of the survivors. But I think excavating will be absolutely key, because there has to be accountability. Some of these orders are still running schools right now. It's not dim and distant past. I've relatives who were put into homes, and they're still alive. So, and we know that survivors of not mother and baby homes, but other types of institutions have been protesting up until recently. This is a very, very living, sensitive issue. So the state should sit down with those affected.
Do survivors feel that they've been left out of this conversation thus far, and is that indicative of our history in relation to this?
Do you want to say something?
I think, yes. And remember, one group in the redress scheme that was established were left out was people who weren't in mother and baby homes for more than 6 months. So there was an exclusion right from the beginning. There's been huge protests and anger about that, a completely arbitrary sort of demarcation line over who's considered worthy of full redress, when the issue is that children and mothers were forcibly separated by the repressive, coercive regime, church and state regime that operated in this country and that stigmatised mothers who had children outside wedlock. So, the fact that there were 6 months or not 6 months in a mother and baby home doesn't change the fundamental issue of the forcible separation. So you can see the sort of state's calculations are not based on really listening to the survivors and the people who were victims of this regime of brutality directed at women and children. So that's the sensitivities you're talking about, and therefore, as Ruth said, the issue is engagement. The issue is engagement with the survivors, and to try and work through something that is, genuinely sensitive to the trauma that people have suffered. And just, to repeat, there's a very large portion of this site has already been built and developed. So, what they're looking for is the excavations and, something that respects the immediate environs of the facility, or whatever we want to call it, of the mother and baby home. So that's what's necessary, and I think the state should make it clear that is their view about this very, very serious issue. Because if they're serious about apologies and all that, then the apology has to mean something, and it has to show real sensitivity to